Hello, everyone. Deidre here, licensed therapist and pastor. Guys, we're talking about codependency today. A necessary, critical, and crucial conversation. Everyone wants to be needed and everyone wants to come through for someone, but there is a time where there is an unhealthy reliance on someone, or someone has an unhealthy reliance on you. And the most common instances of codependency, the context, let me say, is where there could have been addiction. And a lot of what we talk about here usually stems back to childhood. Not everything stems back to childhood, but unfortunately, you guys, childhood is where a lot of things begin. And so just bear with me. Don't get frustrated like, why is everything always about my childhood? Well, a lot starts there. There are times where a child grows up in a context where there is addiction, and that child develops a codependent relationship as they grow with others, because they're so used to having to cater to their parents' needs and varying moods, and so they find themselves, being in relationships where they're always having to appease someone and cater to someone, and literally are walking on pins and needles and eggshells around others. They're just used to having that kind of relationship. It's not healthy. It's a very codependent relationship. Another context where codependency can grow and develop is in the context where there's abuse, whether it's physical, emotional, sexual, otherwise. And children who grow up in these kinds of environments tend to gravitate to relationships where abuse exists, and they tend to hide their feelings as defense mechanisms. And so codependency can kind of be seen in their adult relationships from there. Another context is where there is mental or physical illness, and I say this with all sensitivity. There are children who grow up in homes where there's just a lot of sickness, a lot of challenges, a lot of need for care for a parent, and the child grows up being so used to being depended on and needed that their self-worth is associated now with being needed and being dependent on. So now they find themselves in adult relationships and they're like, oh my word, I don't feel comfortable, or I feel like you don't love me because you don't need me, or I feel like I'm not coming through for you and I feel guilty and I feel bad because there's nothing that I have to do for you. There's nothing that I have to fix. There's nothing that I have to figure out. And the other person's like, we're good. But you find yourself just like always feeling the need to show up for them and do and do and do. And chances are it's because you've just gotten used to being needed and having to care for and cater to, not for bad reasons, but just sometimes that's what the context has called for in your childhood. And this one, you guys, is rough because, man, another context where people grow up to be in codependent relationships is when they have a parent or have parents who are emotionally immature, and that's gonna be a whole nother video. Parents who are emotionally immature and they rely so much on their child to fulfill their emotional needs. Come on, parents, listen. Woo. So that child grows up feeling responsible for the feelings of others. And again, we're going to unpack that another time. But you can imagine how these various contexts definitely lend themselves to codependency. It is evident in parent-child relationships where you can find the young adult feels responsible for the parent's happiness, and the child lies to the parent to avoid maybe making the parent angry or sad or disappointed. You see it showing up in romantic relationships where you're constantly focusing on your partner's needs, and you're constantly focusing on your partner's well-being and having to make sure that they're always okay, while ignoring your own needs, your own feelings. And we already know that these kinds of situations usually make a person feel resentful at the end of the day. And it shows up in friendships. Codependency shows up in friendships. Have you ever been a part of a friendship where the person wants to spend time with someone else and the person's like, they're literally throwing a tantrum, and we think tantrums are limited to toddlers? Like, no. Adults throw tantrums all the time. It's like, oh, now you love them, or now you want to be with them, or now we're not friends, or now you don't feel special to this person anymore, because now they have other friendships and they have other relationships and connections that are meaningful to them. And so you find yourself in this cycle of codependency, this unhealthy reliance on that one friend. And the friend ends up feeling really guilty because they can't always come through for you. They can't always be there for you. They can't always get you out of a bind. And ultimately, you guys, no one wants to be in a codependent relationships. Sometimes we find ourselves in them, but I think it's time for us to work it out. There is a difference between codependency and being dependent or interdependent. Of course, in healthy friendships, you depend on one another. In healthy family relationships, you depend on one another. Romantic relationships, there is a beautiful sense that I can lean on you, you can lean on me. We give to each other, we pour into each other, we add meaning and value to each other. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about are the unhealthy ways where need shows itself, where you cannot thrive without this person, and or if you are on the giving end, you only feel good when you are needed and when someone needs you. Or you only feel good when someone depends on you. And this thing is deep because it can actually allow you to create circumstances where you are needed. Oh my goodness. And where you are dependent on. Why? Because it satisfies a need in you. We're going to work this out, you guys. So we want to get to the bottom of this thing. What do we do now? At the end of the day, we want to take a hard look at our relationships, figure out where there is a need to bring some health back into the dynamic. If you're in an abusive relationship, I know it's really easy for us to say just leave, but ultimately the goal will be for you to be in a non-abusive relationship. And if it's a family context, then yeah, learn to create those boundaries. And will people push back against your boundaries? Yes, but the boundaries are for you. And if it's in a friendship where you see codependency, there comes a time when you have to turn your focus to friendships that are going to have healthy and non-toxic connections. You want to be in situations where these things are life-giving. And I tell my clients this all the time, life-giving. I tell my members this all the time. Is this relationship life-giving? So if it's codependent and you realize that there's an unhealthy exchange of reliance, then it's time to start asking ourselves the tough questions. How did this relationship become codependent? What do I need to do about it now? And take it from there. All right, you guys, we're going to see you next time. And as we're on this journey, you guys, give yourself some grace.